Hello, and welcome to the magical world of G. Michael Vasey, a podcast series. And today I'm talking with Alan Richardson about his new diary, or new book, Visions of Paviland, which I ordered and I read in 2 sessions, and let me tell you, really enjoyed it and learned a lot from it. So I contacted Alan to see if he would spend half an hour or so discussing some of the concepts he raises in the book, and this is that conversation. Thanks to Alan.
I was really taken immediately because of the Devil Rides Out bit.
Oh, yes.
I found it really interesting that was such an influential book for you, whereas I saw the movie when I was about 16, New Year's Eve, and it scared the bejesus out of me, but it also fascinated me, that kind of, scared but fascinated.
Oh, yes.
And I thought it was quite interesting how you weaved that into the story, and you talked about it in a way that I found quite amusing, that back then it scared the hell out of you, but now...
I'm thinking, what on earth is this about? You can see worse on the Teletubbies on British television these days.
Yes.
Yes, I don't know how I came to start, fitting that into my narrative, into my journal. It just sort of, something to do with the horses. And the thing that scared me, the angel of death coming into the storyline on this horse. Yeah. And I thought, when I start to write these journals or these diaries, Gary, strange little light things flit into my mind, and they might not make much sense or make much relevance, but I find I enjoy going with them and floating with them and hoping it doesn't go into too bizarre paths. Although it seemed to work out in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, to me, it was like, wow, that I had the same. I mean, I didn't read the book. I did order the book just like you recently. And just like you, I'm like, well, I don't remember it being as ridiculous as this.
Oh, I know. Exactly. I just remember the monsters that were appearing, and the sense of these men and the great chalk circle on the floor and the pentagrams and the words of power. And that at the time quite fascinated me and scared the life out of me. But there was an odd sort of parallel, as I think I wrote in the book, while I was reading the monstrous beings assaulting the magicians in The Devil Rides Out. That was my mum and dad killing themselves downstairs, and they saw a rather tormented boy upstairs wishing it would all go away. But knowing that somehow this whole question of magic was going to be quite fundamental to my life, however it might turn out.
No, that was the first thing that struck me. And the second thing that struck me was I'd never heard. I mean, I'm interested in archaeology, and I am a geologist, as you know.
I know, yeah. You're Dr. Gary Vasey.
I am. I'd never heard of this Red Lady. So tell me how you sort of heard of it, and how did it capture your imagination?
Well, sometimes in your life and ordinary things, little one-word sentences can stick in mind, or brief memories of something can stick in your mind 30 years after. I was just watching the film El Dorado, the Western with John Wayne, just yesterday, and there was just one sentence I remember from that when I saw it when I was 1967, and I had to watch the whole film just for that one sentence.
Right.
The Red Lady of Paviland was a one reference in a book by Stan Gooch. Years ago, I got a copy of his book, Cities of Dreams, which he went into enormous detail about the Neanderthal, what he describes as the old moon religion, the significance of the number 7, the significance of 13, the moon, the menstrual nature of that type of religion, as he would speculated. And he simply mentioned the Red Lady of Paviland, whose remains were covered in red ochre. The main part of his chapter was all about red ochre and the significance of that, the global significance of red ochre across the whole world, from 30, 40,000, 50,000 years ago. And it's just that one phrase, the Red Lady of Paviland, stuck in my mind. I had no idea where Paviland was. It could have been, Mongolia, as far as I knew.
Right.
But then when we went to Wales, we stumbled upon Wales. You know, I only live 100 miles from it, but we stumbled upon Wales, fell in love with the whole country. And I thought, I must go to Paviland and I must find out more about the cave and reread Stan Gutsch's books. And I took it from there, really. The Red Lady.
Completely hijacked your narrative.
Yes, it did. Absolutely. I wanted to write about the white horses of Wiltshire. Yeah. I just wanted to do, a little journey about me and Margaret, my wife, going on picnics across Wiltshire. Wiltshire has various white horses carved into the hillside. And I thought in the summer, I'll write about white horses and the significance of the white horse and, the spirit and mythology, and bring perhaps Rhiannon into it, because I thought she had a Welsh connection. But no, the Red Lady hijacked it completely. And I suppose there's a part of me still dapping in and out of Paviland even now without understanding what's going on.
Well, the one thing that I was never quite sure of was what was the real fascination? Was it the Red Lady and the Urca and perhaps the shamanic background, or was it the cave itself? Because you refer to the cave as having had a kind of a dark type feel to it for you.
Yes, I did that, Gary. I think it all becomes a kind of a metaphor. I always like the thought that we can in various ways, consciously or unconsciously, connect with ancient energies and beings. And I rather like the thought of connecting with the Red Lady of Paviland herself. And of course, as you know, the Red Lady was actually a red lad, a red fella. So yeah. I had to, change that quite quickly. But it is only when the more and more I was reading about the bones of this figure, who I suspect had to have been a shamanic figure from 34,000 years ago, I realized actually, no, it has to be the cave itself, because it had been used since Neanderthal times, 50,000 years before the bones of the Red Lady were placed within there. So clearly people had been visiting the cave for whatever reason. Perhaps it was just a hideout or places that hunters used to pop into. Originally, it was something like about 40 miles from the sea. Now, we did not manage to physically get up there. And I think the cave becomes a metaphor of things you can have within your psyche. A lot of people have done various pathworkings, as you know. The books are full of pathworkings these days because they're easy to write, basically. I'm not knocking them because I've, done many pathworkings myself. And I thought the cave is quite a kind of a primal thing. There's this dark hole in your brain, as Ted Hughes calls it, dark hole in your mind, in which you can, in a sense, visualize and think, let's see what's in there. And did I have any spectacular visions when I was building up the images of the cave and visiting? Yeah, I had a few little encounters, which was probably self-created, not at all powerful and not at all meaningful. But I think with all the magical stuff that you and I do, that you would do with your chasing the shaman, chasing the goddess in Czechoslovakia, it's the effort you put into it. And often you don't realize how things will work out. Like in that ridiculous novel, The Devil Rides Out, he's telling the story about belting all over the Wiltshire countryside to try to track down this great satanic orgy. And am I reading it in Northumberland as a 14-year-old? Never knew where Wiltshire was, never knew any of the places. And suddenly he's describing all of the places that I later in my present life visited regularly, thinking, my goodness me, that's quite bizarre, that.
Yeah.
And it's often these little things that dap into your mind that if you were to sort of try to tell anybody else, oh, no, look, as I've got this image of the cave, and they might sort of poo-poo you, but you sort of quietly sort of go with it. When I was a younger lad, of course, I was deeply into the Kabbalah. The sphere that always fascinated me was Dath, which is not really a sphere. It's it means
Yeah.
knowledge. It means gnosis.
Yeah.
Or as Kenneth, no, not Kenneth Grant, Osmond Spare said once, knowledge is the excrement of experience. That's a really rather a dark analysis of Dath, but you get what he means.
Yeah.
The sort of part of your mind in which the things that are forgotten and got rid of, and So yeah, the cave become quite important for me. I still sort of visualize it. I still picture. You want to have a look at it on that on the YouTube? I put a link in the book.
Yeah. I saw that.
Yeah, using one of those helicopter things. What do you drones? Powerful drone. And it's really quite quite hypnotized by that. We did try to get to it physically, but we're beaten back by the tides and the fact that the slope is extreme, and I'm getting on a bit, Gary, even though I
you and me both.
Oh, I know. You sort of, I've got to be a bit careful here.
Yeah.
So inwardly I will go to the cave at Paviland. There's inwardly people going to the cave in Glastonbury Tor, as people going to caves beneath the Eildon Hills, as people visualize sacred caves all over the world, really.
It reminded me a bit of the hero's journey, going into your own darkness and having something happen there and coming out with some knowledge, as you say. So it worked for me.
Well, I think we're all on a hero's journey. Gary, you and I have both been through dreadful things in our personal lives, and we wouldn't want to sort of revisit them. But sometimes looking back, you think, what did I learn from that? What did I get from that? Yeah, I don't think we set out to be heroes, but we get through things, I think, hopefully.
Well, another thing I enjoyed was your three-headed figure, which I saw as yet another trinity. Trinod, I think you called him or
her. Yeah. Again, that came out of the blue, completely came out of the blue. Yeah, I think that's perhaps another kind of metaphor. We can look forward, we can look back, and as a part of us, we can dip in and try to look to the present. Whether that's a part of me or not, I don't know. It felt a bit. I didn't have a right name for it. The name felt a bit awkward. The image felt a bit awkward, actually. This sort of came along about the same time I was daydreaming, trying to write about bloody horses, and toward the end of the book, the whole Trinod, the Trinity, kind of faded away, Gary. The whole past, present, and future is all present within us. I do believe that as much as I can believe anything. I don't think there's any future. I don't think there's any past. It's all happening here and now. Yeah. So, in a sense, the Red Lady in Paviland is happening here and now. Somehow, in some way, the cave is here and now. All of these deities and beings, they're all within us, all there, and it's just a matter of peeking in somehow and trying to sort of let them come out if necessary. As much as I understand anything, Gary, I'm a bit of a freak in the fact that I can genuinely believe two opposite things at the same time. Maybe that's a bit of a cop-out, perhaps. Maybe it makes me sit on the fence rather than taking a big, powerful stance on various issues that concern us all. I don't know, but I'm always very happy for somebody to sort of say, this thing that you've believed, Alan, about whatever it is, Dion Fortune or Aleister Crowley, you're completely wrong, and I can prove it. And, my reaction is, oh, great. And take on from there. One of the three different heads within me sort of will deal with that process somehow. Yeah. But I'm always happy for new radical information, no matter how wacky to be thrown in my direction.
Well, I've been exploring trinities here in the Slavic deities as well, and there's definitely something deeply interesting about that whole concept. But talking of Dion Fortune, you also start at one point talking about her, I think it was defense book, and the idea of soulless humans.
Oh, yes.
And that obviously rang a chord with you. But when I was reading it, it also rang a chord with me. I mean, I don't want to get too much into the current situations or anything, but there are people that talk of non-player characters now.
What characters, sorry?
non-player characters, NPCs.
All right.
This idea that in humanity there are, I guess it's another way of talking about, sheep or sheeple, but they call them NPCs. Yes. It's like being in a computer game.
Yes.
And you're controlling some character, and there are other characters in the game that are important, but the rest are just there because they need to be, just to be in the landscape.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about, the soulless, you took it in a certain direction, but for me, it kind of resonated about this current talk of these non-player characters. And I've been talking with a lady in North America who is a Slavic shaman. She's Polish in origin. And I did a couple of podcasts with her, and she actually believes that there are many, many soulless humans incarnated on the planet right now. They are simply mental or astral shells, and they've lost their soul. And I found this a fascinating sort of idea. So I need to rebuy Dion Fortune's book and read the whole thing again, because unfortunately I left it in Houston when I came to Europe. But so that also the whole book rang chords with me all the way through. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it.
Oh, thank you. That's kind. I enjoyed writing it. But I try to keep everything simple, and I just let it float through me, really.
Yeah.
What comes along, I think this is ridiculous. How can I justify writing about the blackbird in our garden when I've just been talking about non-human entities and all sorts of things like that? But I go with it. I'm happily retired. I'm not hard up. I don't desperately have to write books and hope I can get some money to pay the mortgage, etc., etc., etc. So I can indulge myself, and as you know, I self-publish via Amazon and at the minimum recommended price, which means I get about 2 pence in every copy. You know yourself how little you get for these copies, but it means that people might be tempted to buy them. Some books I do want. I mean, more of Stan Gooch's books, they cost a fortune nowadays.
Yeah.
And but I will eventually get around to getting some of them. You can get Psychic Self-Defense, The Unfortunes, online. You can download that, although I don't like reading things on computer screens much. I like to have the actual...
I don't either. I much prefer a book.
Yes, exactly. I do like that. But you can get whatever crucial nuggets that you need from that.
It's just an interesting idea that certain parts of humanity may be in fact soulless, have lost their soul, and maybe this Elder Mountain dreaming, the Polish shaman, she believes that part of what your life is about is reconstructing the soul that you've lost, which is an interesting concept.
Yes, it is. That's Gurdjieff said, what a character he was. Gurdjieff said when he was in his prime, man has no soul, only a potential. And the potential can be achieved or worked toward through inner work. Yeah. And he also added suffering as well, unfortunately. And he's probably right.
Well, I think that's back to the cave again. I mean, plainly, to make any progress in life at all, suffering is a key part. Is a key part of it. I mean, unfortunately, you don't learn anything without experiencing it, and you don't learn often without experiencing pain. So I think suffering is a key aspect of the journey.
Yes and no. Unfortunately, we can rage about the powers that be about this, Gary, and I'm sure we both have done that in the past. Saying to them, for God's sake, why are you doing this to me? Why do I have to go through this?
Yeah.
And I think we should challenge whatever the powers that be are. I've never quite understood it myself. I don't worship any gods or goddesses. I create the images. I'm aware of energies. I'm aware of a sense of marvel that can come from reading about them, and sometimes having a sense of them that's connected to the very land itself. But do I worship them? No, not at all. Absolutely not. Because they are part of me. They're all... if I have any one philosophy, it's the old Gnostic thing that all is one.
Yeah.
Everything is there within us. Past, present, future, gods and goddesses, dear, all the darkness, all the light.
I'm with you. I've come to very much the same sort of conclusion doing the work I've been doing. I just I think it's all happening in an instant, and it's all there all at the same time. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole thing about past lives. I mean, I'm not knocking them, but I've had many, many people read my past lives, and I'm not knocking any of them. But none of them have come out not with to have said the same thing. I must have had an awful lot of past lives, or something else is going on here. I tend to think now of it's all happening instantly, and that there are things as other lives. So there are things within me that in the past I would have thought, I've had a past life as a Benedictine monk connected with Lindisfarne. I've had a past life as an American paratroop. I've had a past life of this, that, and the other, and the borders of Northumberland and the borderland. But I think, no, not past lives. It's different aspects of me, and which sometimes leak over and whisper toward me and give me hints of things. And but again, that's the only way I can make sense of things that float into my head.
Well, it is a strange thing, and I'm going to get a bit personal. I mean, I told you I just met somebody, and
yes.
Part of what's going on seems to be this sense of connection on both sides, even to the point where I can, in meditation, and even when I'm with her, have images of something that seems really real of a past life. But as I told her, I'm not so sure I believe in past life. But there is some connection. There's some shared, I don't know, resonance or vibration or something that is at work. And I just feel like, when that happens, you need to explore it, because it's the magic. It's the important stuff. It's flagging your consciousness. Hey, come and listen. Come and look at this. See what you think.
I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, I have similar things with my wife now, Margaret, who's wonderful, but there are times when you seem to have a tone and empathy for certain periods of history in which, if I were to create a story about it, then she might have had a past life, again in connection with the church in medieval times, and myself. But we can't take it more than that. There's no clear memories. I know we can sit in empty churches and have a sense of bliss and peace. Not all of them, but we can sit in empty churches and have a sense of, wow, touching something very deep within us. It's actually probably not Christian. Both of us have a horror about, the damage that's been done to the world by the Roman Catholic Church. Yeah. Yet, I I have a fascination for some of it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
That's one of the things that I couldn't understand when I was reading that wonderful book. You have to start reading The Devil Rides Out, because when I grew up in Ashington, my dad is a coal miner. It's a coal mining town. I never knew anyone who went to church. Never. Oh, well, there was a Catholic family next door. They went. But there was Denis Wheatley writing about the host. And I thought, what the hell is this host? What's he talking about? And how the host you can walk into the bowels of hell itself, and you'd be, what on earth is this host? And it took me many, many years before I actually found out. And now I think, well, how can a bit of wafer soaked in wine waved about by a paedophile priest save anybody, really?
Oh, well, it's all about transubstantiation, isn't it?
Well, of course. You've put me in my place, Gary. Yes, of course. Yes. So I have all these huge dilemmas. I envy people, the great teachers in this world who are absolutely certain about this and certain about that. I wish I had that degree of certitude. I'm not being modest when I say I can't be a teacher to anyone, really, because most of the time I haven't a clue what's going on. It's not false modesty.
No,
when I'm writing my book,
I say the older I get, the less I'm certain of.
Yes, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
when I was
you are a
writing,
teacher because
sorry?
you are a teacher, and you're a very good one, because you use your gifts to show people another way to be, and I think that's very important. I try to do the same thing. I mean, that's why I write the books I write, not the paranormal stuff. That's to scare the hell out of people.
Oh, sure, of course.
But the like the chasing books, I mean, I'm doing it to try And I know, as you probably know, if 80 people read the book, it's been a good book, you know.
Absolutely, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
you know, if you touch one or two of them and they try something, for example, and then this is the next topic on my list, actually, you did not, and you actually deliberately didn't do it. You didn't, and I don't know if it's invoke or evoke, I never can quite get it right, but you didn't try to invoke the red lad. And yet, it was an earlier diary of yours that led me to that technique that I used with the Slavic gods and goddesses with some effect from my perspective. Anyway,
well,
why did you not
assuming
do
the
that
god
this
form,
time?
wasn't it?
Yes. Why did you not do that this time with him? Why
Well,
try it?
it didn't flow into me. I
Uh,
didn't
yeah,
think it. I didn't think it would.
add
I don't
anything?
know, Gary. I've no idea. I
That
have
was
to.
the one thing that when I was reading it, I was thinking, well, I know you've done this because you showed me this technique through your previous diary. So why haven't you done it this time? Because I probably would have tried that, and maybe I would have been burned.
I don't know, which proves my point. I haven't a clue what's going on really most of the time. No, never entered my head until you mentioned it, Gary. And has the red lad gone from me? Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Yes, the image of the cave keeps popping up, and that's probably. I think the image of the cave has always been there. You know, when
Right.
the first path workings I did again when I was probably about 16, 17 was from Seymour's essay, Charles Seymour's essay that I read, and you know, Charles Seymour is one of the great adepti
Yeah.
within the fraternity of the Inner Light, and he wrote a series of superb essays, and one of them. Oh, it's had various titles. Basically, it is path workings involving the Celtic traditions, and the cave and the mountain. The part of the essay was called "The Wisdom of the Cave and the Mountain," and that always had a big impact upon me then. And I suppose really the cave at Paviland is how many years later? 60, 55 years later, the cave in the mountain writ large,
Yeah.
revisited in differing physical ways. Although, as I said, physically I didn't get down to audit. I suppose all I want to do in writing my books is getting across to people. You don't have to do these great big circles on the floor like Denis Wheatley described. You don't have to do these huge things with pentagrams. You don't have to do these mighty invocations. It's interesting, and we all have a go of it at some time. It's interesting, and it's good practice, and you're putting effort. That's a crucial thing. Inner work. You're putting effort and inner work into it. But sometimes the best thing is just to sort of sit down at a place and say, "All right, teach me."
Mm-hmm.
And I do this all the places. As you know, I live in Wiltshire, so there's any number of places I can go to, and you know, Wales is not far away. Well, the whole countryside, whether you live in Britain, whether you live in America, Czechoslovakia, anywhere, there are
It's what they
places
call
that,
connecting with the land.
yes, of course, and you do, It's I think that's a crucial part of it,
Yeah.
and you know, there's the big invocations. And of course, I even still try wacky things. You know, a couple of years ago, I was going around all the stones in Avebury and I was quietly chanting to them just the vowel sounds, A, E, I, O, U, which connect with the elements, air, earth, fire, and water, just quietly chanting them to each of the stones. Did anything spectacular happen? No. But it felt good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with all of these, you know, long barrows and tumuli and caves, that go back thousands and thousands of years in this country, the best thing you can do is not sort of stand there with your great wand, and I've got my wand, you know, and do these great shouted invocations. It's just to sort of sit down, touch one of the stones, and try to visualize the people who made these places. And the simplest invocation is, you know, by touching the stone, holding the stone gently, you know, the boulder stone or the gate stone or whatever capstone, the people who knew this, the people who built this place once knew love, and so do I. So all the love that they would have had 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 years ago, and the love that you can feel now, it's the one thing that you have in common. nothing else in common. Their practices, you know, the red lady's practices 34,000 years ago would horrify me, you know.
Yeah.
For goodness sake, I'd have been terrified of the sort of things they would do. But the one thing they would have had in common is love. And sometimes by quietly sitting in these places and ignoring anyone who walks around and just sitting there with your flask of tea, you can get something floats through. If it's instant, I would distrust it, but usually things happen not straight away. Sometimes it can take years. You know, work that I did, oh my goodness me, 50 years ago, I think I've just seen it come true. I've seen fruit of it now. And it's all very simple. I envy the classical mystics and magicians who have these spectacular inner experiences. And I absolutely will take them at their face value. I envy them, Gary. And I make note of them and I will quote from them, you know, all of the Unfortunate stuff and Crowley stuff and Seymour stuff, and also my own teacher, Christine Hartley, her stuff.
Yeah.
I take note of them all and I envy them some way. It's never really happened to me, except on very, very rare occasions. But nevertheless, things do sort of slide into place that I think, oh, right, okay, that's what that's all about. And then I carry on and try to live a normal life.
Yeah, I think the points you make are absolutely fundamental, but I think that different people have different levels and types of experiences, and I'm just seeing that now because back to this lady. I mean, she seems able to tap into these Slavic deities with amazing results, and you know, she'll send me a sort of written description of a meditational experience, and I'm sat there thinking, well, wow.
Yeah.
It took me months to get any sense of anything, and you did that in one evening.
I mean, it is a talent that I envy. I mean, I've known, and I know some of, shall we say, the great ones. You know, the real biggies. You know, the Premier League magicians and mystics and witches and mediums, and I've known, but I can count them on the number of two hands.
Yeah.
And I've known hundreds who are really making a lot of noise, and but nevertheless, the noise itself is important. I mean, you know, Denis Wheatley hadn't a clue about magic when he was writing The Devil Rides Out. Yet somehow he triggered off things within me quite unwittingly.
Well, you and I both. That's why that was the first thing, you know, when I was reading the book. I'm like, wow, you know, that's interesting that sort of that book, in your case the book, in my case the movie, was so, you know, influential. And yet, as I said, I ordered the book and I started to read it. I couldn't get past like the third chapter because it was bloody ridiculous.
It's boring.
What did I ever see in this?
It's utterly boring, Gary. You know, it's I have to fast forward to the invocations and the racy parts and the coven meet with the goat of Mendes appearing. Complete nonsense, of course it is. But behind all of that nonsense, he was, as Bill Gray knew him. You know, half of the magical community at that time were involved with British intelligence.
Yeah.
You know, there were half a dozen members of Dion Fortune's fraternity, the Inner Light, were connected with British intelligence. And Crowley himself was connected with British intelligence at that time. So, as of course, Denis Wheatley in that world, which is why Bill Gray knew him. And didn't you know Denis Wheatley was a shit? And, well, I don't doubt it. Horrible, the characters he described. But I must tell you, before it goes out of my mind, when I was reading something the other night, and I'll have to track it down, because, of course, you're in Czechoslovakia, and there are times I know you've wondered, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah.
And then you started working with the land. I read something talking about Neanderthal figures, priestess figures in caves. There's a famous cave in Czechoslovakia with what seems to be in a ceremonially buried, and I'm sure a female, with all sorts of accoutrements around her that goes back decades of thousands of years in the past.
Yeah.
And I just read this a couple of weeks ago. I meant to contact you to see whether you had any notions about that. So maybe that's your own Czechoslovak equivalent of a cave in Paviland to get your lady and yourself to track down.
Yeah, shoot me an email with the name and I'll do some looking up of it. At the
I'll
moment,
see if I can find it.
Yeah, please. At the moment, as you know, I'm chasing energy lines and trying to understand what that all means. Having some amazing, weird experiences in the process, beginning to come to some sort of strange views about the women of weird, or the weird web, and the energy lines, and how they somehow reflect your own life back on you, and it's very bizarre. But that's my fascination here right now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the rare moments in which I've had bursts of visionary bursts. They do happen occasionally, and I can't switch them on. And it's when I was in one of the last times I physically saw Bill Gray, William G. Gray, the great beast of Cheltenham. And I'd had one child then, my eldest daughter, Zoe. We were obviously not going to settle for just one child. But I was talking to Bill Gray, and I mentioned about our daughter, and he says, I mean, Bill Gray was notoriously psychic, frighteningly psychic. And he said to me, you won't have any more children. You know, he did that funny thing that the psychics can do and seem to see right through me. Right. No, you won't have any more children, which was a bit of a worry because my wife had just been told that she had slipped womb then and that she might not have any more. But that was a moment in which, for some reason, spontaneously, and I can only describe it as, you know how it goes in metaphors, I seemed to, a part of my consciousness shot upward instantly there and then into a kind of place. You talked about women of the weird, that's what made me think about it. There seemed to be a whole bunch of women in this place that I visited weaving. That's the best I can describe it, weaving, women weaving. And there's a powerful sense of my own sense said, oh no, Bill, you're going to be wrong about that. And it is a very, very instantaneous, timeless sense in which I was determined that Bill Gray's prediction was not going to come true. And it didn't. I have 4 daughters. I celebrated with them just 2 days ago at the weekend. So you mentioned about the women of the weird. That was my spontaneous experience that people can predict things, and I do believe you can challenge them. You should challenge them. Absolutely. There are times when people have predicted things, oh no, and I thought, I'm not going to accept that. And but that was certainly a very powerful experience I had with Bill Gray on that occasion, in which I was determined to make him wrong. And whatever role the weird women of weird weaving had upon me, that is a very strong experience then. So clearly you were meant to mention women of the weird on this occasion in our talk now.
It's been very, very strong. And I think what you're alluding to is absolutely correct, is that fate is spun, but it's being spun as it happens almost, you know. It's and then it's all things are there all at the same time in essence, as we talked about earlier. And it's a very hard thing to even try to describe, but this is where these energy lines are taking me. It's some of the most bizarre experiences that perhaps if I was to tell somebody, they'd say, well, you're nuts, you know. But you know how it is in magic. Sometimes you something happens and you're like, well, that is absolutely bizarre. Why would that happen? Yeah.
As well, you know, sometimes these things can be so, if you were to tell anyone else, it can seem so trivial to them.
Yes.
Yet they are so profound.
Yes, exactly. It's
to
amazing.
Yourself. You know, trivial things said, trivial scenes in a film even, you know, and like yourself in The Devil Rides Out, like me in all sorts of books, one word sentence that stick in your mind for years and years and years, decades in our case. You eventually think, right, okay, that makes sense of it to me, finally. And then you just carry on to the next stage.
Well, just to last few minutes, I wanted to cover a couple of other things real quick as well, which was obviously the Stan Gooch angle and some of his writings, which I looked up, and they struck a chord with me because the sort of patriarchal and matriarchal, if I can even say the words.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that I think we've lost the important feminine side that we need to really bring back. But it struck me as well that, you know, we tend to have a sort of look at Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons and all that sort of stuff as rather dumb, backward creatures. But I was reading something the other day about cave drawings.
Oh yes, of course.
And I thought I'd tell you this because it really struck me. For a long, long time, archaeologists apparently have been quite weirded out by the fact that some of these cave drawings have vertical striations. And this is something they've seen many, many times. And you'll get like a drawing with two heads or two tails, and that also has puzzled them. And apparently it's been discovered by accident that in certain lighting in a cave, it animates the drawing.
Wow.
So these people were drawing animations on cave walls 30,000 years ago.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. If you do get Stan Gooch's last book, which is Andata Legacy, because it's inexpensive. It's a thin book. It's a summary of his work, and it's He's writing as a bitter man. Everyone laughed at him. Everyone scorned all the things he was saying about the marvelous culture of the Neanderthals. Don't be ridiculous. Yet more and more of what he was writing then has been proved true. Stan Gooch was staggeringly psychic, but he didn't describe it to external forces like spirits or beings. He was as psychic as any of the great magicians of our time, but he looked at it from a very, very different point of view. So if you get his last book, as I said, it's inexpensive, it is slim, but it absolutely covers the broad spectrum of what he's writing. I've got some of his other books, and they are so dense I cannot fathom. I want an easy read. I'm not an academic, Gary. I'm very, very smart, but I'm not an intellectual. And some of Gooch's books, he's writing at the height of his intellectual capacity, while also being a staggeringly psychic man, and it goes way over my head. But the last one, and also his Cities of Dreams, if you can get a second-hand copy from Amazon, is all about red ochre and the Neanderthal cultures that so fascinated him, and this is where he first mentioned about the Red Lady of Paviland.
Well, I don't know whether I was reading more into it than perhaps I should, but towards the end, and especially when I looked at like Wikipedia entry for him, it seemed to me that with he was almost talking about the great work in humankind, in the sense that you had the solar people and the moon people that came together. Unfortunately, it turns out the sun kind of ate the moon a little bit.
Yes.
But it's like a great work led to Homo sapiens, and I don't know if that rings anything with you, but I was like, wow, that's really interesting.
I go along with it. Yes, that's what he was arguing. Get his stuff. I'm still taking it on board myself. I mean, I'd rather read stuff like that is based upon all sorts of accepted things than the purely visionary stuff of many modern writers these days that are grounded upon not very much at all. And then I'll be done with Stan Gooch eventually, and I'll find someone else who will sort of get my attention, and possibly yourself, Gary.
Well, just to finish off, and let's not spoil anything for anybody that reads the book, but I loved the ending.
Thank you.
Talking of Stan, I thought the ending was just exactly the sort of magical, the way that magical journeys often end, with something completely surprising.
Yes, it was. Again, not to spoil the ending, I didn't expect that either. That came out of the blue to me, and I thought, blimey. Stand.
Yeah.
So thank you for your kind comments, Gary. I'm glad you bought it. So that'll add another 2 pence to my royalties this coming month.
You should. I'm sure that people can afford £1. I mean, if I was you, I'd at least put £1 on the book.
Oh, no.
At least you have a cup of tea.
Oh,
maybe £1's not enough for a cup of tea anymore. I don't know.
No, not at all. When you come over here, the tea's on me. I tell everyone if ever I meet you, and if you bought a copy of my book, I buy you a cup of tea. So that's my promise.
Sounds good.
So again, my thanks to Alan Richardson for joining me on this edition of The Magical World of G. Michael Vasey, Series 3, a podcast. If you enjoyed it too, would you please like and share and push it around a little bit, expose it to other people? I'd much appreciate that. Details of Alan's book can be found in the notes below this podcast. Please do go out and buy it. Alan, as he said, doesn't make much money on these books, but they are full of true esoteric wisdom. This is G. Michael Vasey saying goodbye.